Okay, good morning. This morning we'll be talking about supposedly America's favorite fruits, peaches and nectarines, and certainly one of the most predictable fruit trees we know of. Because if the conditions are right, generally you do get a good crop. You do have to do the work, but you'll get your crop. Whereas sometimes other fruit trees are mysterious, where everything can be right and you still don't get anything. But peaches and nectarines, especially peaches, are generally quite reliable. Now, the one thing to know about both peaches and nectarines is that they do both have a minimum chill requirement. Anyone here know what that means? Everybody here know what that means? Anyone who doesn't know what that means? Okay, so they need a certain amount of cold in the winters. So it's actually the flower buds on the branches themselves that form at the base of each leaf during the fall that need a certain amount of cold in the winter to finish development and bloom at the right time. And if they don't get it, they don't bloom. And if you don't bloom, you don't get any crop that year. And 2013, 2014, 2015, and last year were some of the warmest winters we've ever had here, although we've seen it before. It's not totally unusual. But when we had those winters without much cold, the trees didn't wake up in April, didn't wake up in May, didn't wake up in June. Finally, in August, they would put a few leaves out, a few flowers would open, and they'd get maybe, instead of say 20 leaves and 2 foot of growth from each bud, they would put on maybe 2 or 3 leaves out of each bud and not grow hardly at all. And if you have several years in a row that, it takes them a while to recover from that. And sometimes they don't recover from that, so it's not good to have the warm winters. This last winter was a very nice winter. Now the chill that the trees need is anything below 55 degrees and above above 33 degrees. So 34 to 55, they get chill, although they don't get the same amount of chill at each temperature. They get the most chill right around, I believe it is 42 to 45 degrees. And they go by the hours spent at those chill hours. Now, right around 42 to 45 degrees, it's become apparent that they get more than 1 hour chill for every hour you spend at that temperature. You get less chill as you reach 55 degrees to 55 to 60, you get 0 chill. And if you go below 34 degrees, or if you get close to 34, you're getting less chill than 1 hour at each hour you get exposed. So there's the most chill you get. I don't know how much it is, if it's an hour and a half for every hour and a quarter for every hour chill you spend at around 42 to 45 degrees. We know it's very little around 55, but you still get a little bit. So, the most important thing is don't get too hot in the winter. If you get 90 degrees in January, you start losing a couple hours of chill for every hour you spend there. So it's important and it is, again, it's the actual bud on the branch. It's not the roots, it's not the trunk, it's the buds on the branch that need that cold. Some things you can do to help the tree get more chill is to keep it in the shade or have the branches shaded in the winter. You can also paint the branches white, which reflects some of the sun's energy, or cover the tree with something. So those are some strategies you can use. One of the things I've always done at my house, anything that needed a lot of chill that I wasn't thinking I was going to get, I'd plant it on the north side of a house. So I had a 2-story house, and in the wintertime, the shadow, if this is south and this is north, and I planted my peach tree, say, here, in the wintertime, the shade from the house did that. And they were in shade all winter, so that really helps them get a little more cold, whereas the south side, you're actually getting double heat from the wall and from the sunlight, so the south side would be the worst place to grow a tree that needs more chill. but they do need full sun when the fruit's ripening. The more sun you get when the fruit's ripening, the more sweet it is. But in the summertime, the shade is only like this. So that is one microclimate in your yard that helps. If you have a north side of an evergreen tree, north side of a block wall, north side of a house, anything that can give them a little shade in the winter, that helps. As long as you're not right up against the wall, you'll get the sun in the summer. Most of the peaches, fortunately, ripen, and nectarines ripen when the sun's at the highest, between May and August. The sun is at the highest as can be. So they'll usually get sunlight in those areas. So that helps. Now, one of the big things that's changed in the last 20 years is how to train a peach or nectarine tree. From the 40s until, say, the early 2000s, we were told when you plant a peach tree, and usually back in the early days, back in the 1970s when I first started taking care of peach trees, when we get a peach tree, we got essentially a fishing pole. One stick, no branches. So in order to make this branch out low, the main thing to do is to cut it off at 18 inches after you plant it, to force it to branch out starting down here. And in the old days, they showed pictures of peach trees in orchards. The guy can sit right on the top of this tree because it's only knee height, and he'd have essentially 16 vertical branches going up, and then the side branches off of that are making peaches. So they grow peach trees maybe 20 foot across, maybe 8, 10 foot tall. It'd take them 5 years to train this out in the open vase like that. Totally changed in the last 10 to 20 years. The problem is that what we know about peaches and nectarines is that they make their best crop before they're 10 years old. And beyond 13 years, statistically in an orchard, it's not economically good to keep those trees any longer than that. Their production is dropping off. I mean, still, for 25 years, you're probably going to have peaches for your family. But for a orchard, they're dropping off so badly after 13 that they said, okay, it's time to get rid of this tree, plant something else or something new. So apparently all the pruning we do to keep peach trees making the best fruit possible does kill them. Peaches, nectarines are among the worst trees at healing wounds. Whereas, interesting, the relative, the apples, are supposedly the best tree at healing wounds among any tree. Ornamental or edible, apples heal their wounds really well. So peach orchards nowadays last 13 years, apple orchards 150. And that's all due to the fact that they can withstand the pruning better, and peaches cannot. So it took 5 years to create this open vase with 16 vertical branch trunks. And that was essentially half the tree's life to do that. So nowadays, they're not doing as much. Now, again, unfortunately, with orchards, see, they have to do economics. So when they buy peach trees, like when we buy a peach tree, this is about as skinny as one as I'll ever want to buy. That's about a half-inch trunk. Well, the orchards, they tell each other, don't buy anything thicker than 3/8 inch caliper. That's pencil thick because of the price point. It's much cheaper to buy something 3/8 inch thick than it is a half-inch thick. We like to go 3/4 inch or even bigger for our customers because they have branches on them. But the orchards still, when they plant their trees, they're just a stick like this. So what they do to create the lower branching, otherwise, if you have say a 5-foot pencil thick trunk that they buy in the winter, it'll probably branch out up here, and that's too high. The fruit's already up here. We want the fruit forming as low as you can to make it easy to pick. So what they do is they still cut them off at about 18 inches. And a lot of times they'll let it, well, one of the methods now is to go with 2 trunks. Instead of 16, just 2. And then you train these to be fairly straight up, and then the side horizontal branches coming off of those make the fruit. Now in Canada, they don't have enough time. They buy bigger trees apparently that look more like ours, and they say, just go with the 1 trunk. And that's what we're promoting for most of our customers too, is just if you get the 1 trunk and you already have the side branching on it, just go with that. Leave it 1 trunk. Now, what they've discovered among all orchard trees is the most efficient size for an orchard tree is 5 foot wide. 5 foot wide. Because what they found is that if you got a nice bushy tree, if it's more than 5 foot wide, that sun's never going to make it to the middle of that tree. There's dead space in the middle. If it's 10 foot wide, sun goes through 30 inches of foliage. You've got a huge spot in the middle of the tree that's not productive because it's too dark. So that's inefficient. They don't want that anymore. So all the orchards are getting smaller. The trees are getting smaller and smaller, even though they're not naturally dwarf. Unfortunately, there are some genetically dwarfed peaches, nectarines. Unfortunately, they're not any good. Their quality is real poor. The one peach that was halfway decent taste-wise needed 500 hours to chill. So we can't grow that one. The peaches that don't need as much chill and would grow here were mediocre quality. They said, they promote them as comparable store quality. Well, you know what that means. It means they're terrible. So the best peaches are the regular peaches, and you just trim them. Even dwarf trees, I've grown a lot of true dwarf, genetically dwarf peach trees, and after 5 years, if you don't trim them, they're over your head anyway. It's not hugely different. And the quality you get on regular peach trees is generally superior. So anyway, the shape of a modern fruit tree, they call it a spindle shape. I mean, truthfully, a dome would be the perfect shape. A true dome, because that has the most surface area. Whereas the old-fashioned vase turns out to be the worst possible shape you can have for a fruit tree. A dome is the best part. It's got the most surface area on it. Of course, the branches would have to come out like this, but it's just hard to do peach trees that way, so they go with the spindle shape. One central upright branch or trunk, and everything else fairly horizontal. Doesn't that be perfect, but fairly horizontal, and that gives you the best production per square foot. So it could be like 7, 8 foot tall. They don't want to go too tall because it's too hard to reach the fruit. In orchards now, everything's about low cost of labor. If you got to climb a ladder, you're suddenly in trouble. It takes a lot longer to climb a ladder. So 5 foot wide. Now, the other thing that's good about this is you can fit a lot more trees in your orchard. Or, in an orchard, they have to plant a lot more trees now to make up for the size that the trees are smaller. But then they can get production the second year instead of having to wait 5 years for this thing to fill out. Second year, you're already harvesting. The other thing about it is this form here already produces probably about 80 fruits on that structure. And peaches and nectarines ripen generally within 2 to 3 weeks. There's no way homeowners can be able to use more than that unless you got a huge family. I mean, when I used to grow my peach trees, the old-fashioned vase shape, it's like, okay, when the thing's ripening, you got to find anybody and anyone to give away the fruit to, because there's no way you can eat. Like this thing would make 400, 500 fruit 3 weeks. You got to pick it and eat it. There's just no way. We're making peach pies all over the place. And giving away peach pie. It's like, Like, what do you do with all those peaches? So now that we know how to trim them to a smaller size that's more productive, then you can make better use of your ground. So there's peaches that ripen between April and around here it's April to August, the peach tree ripening period. So there's different cultivars that you can get, some that ripen in April, some in May, some in June, some in July, some in August. So you can load if you like peaches, you can plant a peach tree every 5-6 feet apart and train it and have a good crop on each one and have some variety in your yard. And most fruit trees you can do that with, not just peaches, but peaches. I think they've done the most research on pruning technique on peaches of anything. So one of the problems we have is that, like in most fruit trees, peaches produce on 1-year-old wood. So this peach here is growing on a branch that grew last year. So when this branch continues growing this year, it's going to grow another 2 foot longer. It might grow out of the dimensions we want, 5 foot wide. This is this year's growth. This will fruit next year. So the main thing is any branch from last year that fruits, this one didn't fruit this year, but this is last year's branch. After the fruit's off or by next winter, we're going to cut these real short, because if by the end of the year these will be way out here, they'll be long, maybe 2 foot longer than we want them to be. So they're out of the proper zone now. So we'll cut them, but not totally off. We'll cut them short, and hopefully next year they'll regrow into the same position that we want. I think it was University of Ohio found out that the best fruit on peaches and nectarines forms on branches that grew that previous year, this year, for next year, that grew between 12 and 24 inches long. If they were shorter than that, they don't have enough energy to create the best fruit possible. If they were longer than that, they don't have many flower buds. They're using too much energy to grow length rather than make flower buds. So they found that, by December, when you're doing your last prune up for the year, you can already see the flower buds on the branches. At the base where each leaf was attached, there's a bump, and you can tell it's a flower bud. So you can pretty much see where your buds are. So you want to save the branches that grew between 1 and 2 foot long, fairly horizontal. Now on this tree, at the moment, this branch is going very vertical. Hopefully, as it grows more, it'll weigh itself out. If it doesn't, by summer, it's nice to pull this sideways. If you want to get your most production you can, pull this branch fairly horizontal. Not be perfect horizontal, but fairly horizontal, so the leaves can catch more sunlight. So all these branches that are pointing upwards, nice to get them pulled down. You can put stakes nearby and tie them all to the stakes. They suggest adding weights to them. I don't like weights. I think they'll be dangerous if it gets windy. And then by the end of the year too, we want to have the branches spaced about 1 foot apart on each side. Now, that's it's you have to kind of say, okay, I'll divide my tree into 4 sides or 6 sides. Say, on this side of the tree, here's a branch here, and then here's the next branch coming down. That's plenty of room between them. That's fine. This one, that's another foot between those. That's fine. In fact, I've already pruned these trees for this year, so I did space the branches out pretty nicely. This one, actually right now what would be good to do is cut this one short, force it to regrow a new branch into that same position it's in right now, because this is going to just grow bigger. And then this one just came out. This one's in the right spot. So we have a line of branches on this side, and then you say, okay, I'll look at this side now. I've got a branch here, a branch here, a branch here. Well, this one was last year's branch. I cut it shorter, and it's got this new one coming out. Or I might just cut this one off and use this one instead. So you want to have branches on all sides about 1 foot apart going up and down the stem. Space them out nicely. If they're too close together, they just don't have enough sunlight exposure to make a good crop. And again, try to get them more horizontal. and then you have the maximum production. Mm-hmm.
So, if I understand correctly, to choose the one to trim is the ones that have the buds or the flowers. The ones to keep, and the others you trim them, and you have to keep a foot away from each one. And the tree stays this small, kind of, because you're trimming every year
Mm-hmm.
to keep it just this big. It doesn't branch out to become.
Right.
Okay.
Because if you do, then you start wasting space in your garden. I mean, it's not that critical because most people don't trim their peach tree, so they just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're still fruiting, but the branch, the fruit is moving further and further from the center. So you're taking more room in your yard to get the same fruit, whereas you could have kept it real small and get a lot of fruit in a small area, other than letting it grow larger and larger, because
How
they
about
have.
the top?
Yeah, you can cut the top back too, so you can reach your fruit. I mean, this is almost the perfect height for this fruit tree already. Uh, and if it's, hopefully this year will grow about this wide, then it'll be the perfect width also. Now this one we didn't. This one we did last year. We didn't catch it because it was at our growing ground instead of in the store where I can take care of things. So it grew another branch that got pretty big, but it's fruiting, so I'll just let it fruit. And after the fruit's off this in summer, we might cut it down to about here and see if we can regrow a branch here in summer. Now, all the stone fruits will grow new growth spring and summer. All the way till the first day of fall, they're growing. So if you do any pruning, you can do pruning, and well, we don't like to prune them right after they leaf out because they've just used all their energy to make new leaves. So that was about 2 months ago when they just leafed out. Now they've leafed out a while, I've been pruning them. So you don't want to do pruning right after they bloom and right after they make a new set of leaves. That's when they're at their weakest. They put all the energy in all those leaves. Don't start pruning too much at that time. Waiting for a few months after that to get their energy back, then you can start pruning. But you can prune all summer long. So I might take this branch off, cut it short, and hopefully it'll grow a new branch to take its place that's more horizontal, because this is too vertical. Now there's no rules in your garden. So if you want to have a tree with 2 trunks, that's fine. Most orchards in California are using the two trunk system because they have to cut it low to make them branch out, and so they said, you go to California, modern California orchards, all the trees look like U's in a line, or Y's, just all lined up like that. So that's how they're doing it, with 2 trunks or 2 main verticals instead of just one. Canada's doing one. They said we don't have time to do 2. Just do 1. Now the other thing about this one from last year is I haven't fed it yet, so it is showing the fact that it's needing some nitrogen. So you see the reddish color of the new leaves here. They're going to turn into spots, and the spots are going to drop out, leaving holes in the leaves in another month or so. So I got to hurry up and feed this one. It'll look like something ate it. There'll be holes in there, or look like some disease. It's not a disease. It just needs some fertilizer. This is a nitrogen deficiency showing up as these red spots on the leaves. When I was back in the 1980s, when I first started taking care of the fruit trees, this happened to us every summer. It's like, so I thought, God, it's shot hole fungus. I'd spray it for fungus, still get it. Spray for bugs, still get the holes. And I said, well, what if we just fertilize it like crazy and outgrow it? And then it never happened anymore. So definitely it was a nutrient deficiency, and some of the books will show this reddish spots forming up the lack of nitrogen in the foliage. So, yes.
How about yellowing
Well, yellowing could be a sign of lack of nitrogen too, although on peaches it tends to be this reddish color. Yellowing could also mean bad root system. I mean, I don't like the quality of peach trees that any other company grows for retail. We grow all our own in our own soil. You go to other nurseries, their trees don't look like this. Dave Wilson, who supplies us with the bare trees, every time he comes to see me, he says, your trees look better than I've seen in any nursery. Because we figured out soil 20 years ago. Everybody else is trying to grow their trees in ground up wood, and it just doesn't work. I mean, we don't know why the industry hasn't fixed, this is a different subject, but it is really strange that the industry still thinks ground up wood or ground up dead trees is a proper place to grow a living tree. It's like, okay, that doesn't sound right, but that's what everybody's doing. So we don't use dead trees. The other thing you have to do, so when they bloom, most peach trees bloom, well, it depends. The ones that need the least amount of chill tend to bloom the earliest. So we get some peaches blooming late January or February. Some peaches are just now blooming right now, the ones that need more chill. Once the peaches are about the size of marbles, it's time to thin it. So generally on a tree, every bud on the branch can make a fruit. And generally you'd have about 10, 15 fruit on the branch this long. It can only support about 2. Or fruit, well, on a, say if it's a 2-foot branch, generally they're spaced about 8 inches apart. And we're just talking to a guy who runs a peach orchard this last weekend. And he says, yeah, I got to thin off 80% of all the fruit that forms on the tree. I got to thin it off. It's a lot of work. So that's what they do all spring. I don't know how they, if you've got an orchard of 1,000 trees, how in the world do you do this? You got to have a lot of workers out there picking off. Like here we got all these little fruit forming here. Let's say, take off this one, and that one. That one's got enough room, that one's got enough room. We got to take off, say, this one here. Otherwise, they stay real small and are mostly seed instead of flesh. So you really have to thin out your tree quite nicely.
How many inches?
8 inches between centers of the fruits. Yes.
I did an experiment about that peach tree that I grew from seed. I've got clusters of little fruits, like 2 and 3 and 4 little clusters. So thin those down to 1.
Right.
And just what, biggest fruit or just one that speaks to me now?
Yeah, I mean, with peaches, when you're thinning them, you don't want them to be, in between the crotch of 2 branches, because they just get embedded in there. And if they often make doubles, so peaches often make 2 fruit forming together. You got to just take those off. No one has ever seen a double peach mature, where they're stuck together like Siamese twins.
Yeah, well, these aren't stuck together, but they're in a clump.
Right.
So I just didn't know if I could experiment and leave the stuff at the smallest and then the biggest.
Yeah, sometimes if the tree is really, really vigorous, and especially when they're young, they can create a lot of peaches in a small area. But if you want the best peaches you can make, then it's better to space them out. Yes.
Do you wait until they formed or when they're blue?
Well, you don't want to pick them. You don't want to thin your peaches when they're too small, because a lot of them abort on their own. But when they're about marble size, or say thumbnail size. Thumbnail size is a good size. When they're about 3/4 of an inch, then you know they're not going to abort, and then you got to get rid of them. Some peaches are worse than others. We know August Pride, which is our #1 favorite peach, doesn't make that much fruit. But then you go Tropic, Snow, or some of the real highly productive trees, they make way too much fruit. You got to thin it all, 90% of it off. So that can be a bit of work too. Just doing that. Yes.
I have an August Pride that's about that size, and I noticed that it's fruiting great. I just put it in the ground like a month ago, and it's starting to get past the leaf point. The branch has a little bit of dieback. How normal is that? How much should I was going by the other day and
Okay. Well, that's part of that's part of our maintenance. So let's go over maintenance on the peaches and nectarines. So there's some things that you have to do every year. Nectarines require one more thing than peaches do, but otherwise they do. There's a couple things you absolutely have to do. One is generally in midwinter, well, early to mid-winter, you spray for peach leaf curl. There's a disease called peach leaf curl that affects all peaches and nectarines. When it rains about 10 inches or more, we get it. And so there's a couple products on the market. This one's called copper fungicide. Most of them have copper in them. A few have, like there's one product called lime sulfur, copper Bordeaux, copper master cop, and this is called copper fungicide. And you spray this all over the branches in the winter when they're bare, and it'll do it at least once. Generally, that's all we ever do it here, and we don't see the peach leaf curl disease. Now, in the orchards, they can't afford to have this disease at all. And they say, like near Fresno, you go there in the wintertime, and it smells like sulfur because they're spraying their orchards every 5 inches of rain. They said if it rains 5 inches, they spray again. Rains 5 more inches, they spray again. Because when the peach leaf curl is real bad. Now, what peach leaf curl looks like is all the new leaves come out with red blisters on them. They look really angry. By summer, those leaves are gone. They've dropped off. The tree has made new ones. You'll forget you even had it. But the tree wasted a lot of energy making a second set of leaves to replace the ones that were blistered. Once the tree blooms, finishes blooming, the sprays don't help. So we've had people come in the last few weeks tell us, I got peach leaf curl. What can I do? I said, well, you do this next winter because there's nothing you do now. The tree will cure itself, but it'll waste a lot of energy doing it, making a whole new set of leaves that could have used to make the fruit better or sweeter or something else. So commercially, they can't afford to have it, so every 5 inches of rain. Now, I would say if you did it once in winter, you're probably good. You should be fine.
Ideally December, January, you said early to midwinter.
Well, yeah, you want your leaves to be off. They say the most effective time is when the buds are just starting to swell, when they're starting to show a little color. But I don't like to wait that long because you don't know exactly when it is, and you miss it. And if it's raining during that time, I'd just rather get it in sometime around Christmas, New Year's, just to get it in there. Yes.
If you want to grow organic, pesticide.
This is used on organic gardening. It's got the organic label. It's not organic, but this is a mineral, so it's about as, they allow certified organic orchards to use some things that are not totally organic. I mean, I'm sure this would kill you if you drank it, but it's not a manufactured, it's copper soap is what it is, but they have certified it for organic gardening. It's got the little thing on here. And, they've used copper on grapes and peaches for thousands of years, so what can you do? It's what works. So, yes.
I was told about the peach leaf curl to take off all the leaves that have it and dispose of them separately because they were worried about them falling and getting into the ground and making the disease worse.
I haven't heard that.
Okay.
I don't think that's, what they found, I haven't seen it on peach leaf curl, but they know on rose diseases, they said once the leaf is on the ground fungi eat up those spores so fast that generally if you don't clean your rose bed, or if you do clean your rose bed, it doesn't make any difference. They said there's so many spores floating in the air throughout the world, it don't make any difference.
Interesting. Okay, because we spend like at least an hour taking off every single leaf.
Yeah. Yeah, so they're telling us it doesn't make, at least on roses, it doesn't make any difference if you clean up the bed or not. Because we used to do that. We used to clean up the rose bed, spray it with lime sulfur, which is one of the few dangerous things last things we ever had. And then they did a test down in Houston to see if it actually did anything. They said, didn't do a thing. All that cleanup work didn't help the roses at all. There's too many spores floating around. Okay, so that's the winter. When they bloom, the nectarines are really affected by what are called flower thrips. So this would be bloom time, which can be any time between January and now. They all get flower thrips, which are bugs that get inside the flowers. I think they feed on the pollen, but they do damage the embryos inside. Peaches are immune to thrip damage. The fruit is immune to thrip damage. Nectarines, with their smooth skins, get damaged severely by this little creature in their flower bud with them. And if you get nectarines that are really badly scarred by thrips, you don't even want to eat them. You look at them, because so back in the 90s, I was growing the same nectarines we grow now, and they had the ripe fruit, and they were so badly scarred, like these swooshes going across the skin. They're oozing sap. They were misshapen. I looked at it and said, that looks like something they removed from a tumor. They removed from some sick body. It didn't look like it was very good to eat at all. So I asked, back in the early 90s, I asked the growers, I said, what can I do organically to stop this bug from affecting the fruit? And he said, the only thing we have right now is to cover the whole tree in gauze. I said, boy, I don't know if anyone's going to do that. So we stopped carrying these nectarines that had that problem back in the early 90s and just recently started picking up again because now we've got the right spray. Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew has a product in it called spinosad, which is an ingredient apparently in rum. So they consider it, and they consider it very safe around mammals, humans. It's used throughout organic gardening because it's one of the, and it is magic stuff. I mean, you can spray this on basil, on lettuce, on cabbage to control chewing insects and eat it the next day. First thing I've ever had that you can spray on herbs and leafy vegetables that you can eat the next day because they assume we've already drank this. In veterinary medicine, huge product in veterinary medicine because you can feed a tablet of this to your pet and they'll kill the heartworms, anything crawling around inside of it, on it, it'll kill it when it eats it. It's just amazing stuff. So, you know, if you ate this stuff just like this, it shouldn't hurt you. So we spray this on them when they're blooming. Now, you want to spray it late in the evening. You know, it's still light out, you can see, so to avoid the bees. If you hit this on a bee, you'll kill the bee. Once it dries, it doesn't hurt the bee. But if you spray it right on a bee, you'll kill the bee. No problem with the hive. The bee can't make it back to the hive if you spray it on the bee. But this will control the thrips. The other thing it'll control, so there is another bug out there in the spring called an oriental fruit moth. And I'm looking to see if I have any damage from it. So an oriental fruit moth, the thing about it, it's a little tiny moth that flies around, lays eggs. The moth doesn't do any damage. The caterpillars do the damage. And they drill through the stems. There's 5 generations a year in Orange County. Should have brought some down. Oh, here we go. I see just a little bit of it. So on this little branch here, I don't know if you see little tiny brown leaves on it. Little tiny leaves right there that are turned brown, and they call it flagging of the leaves. So apparently what happened is this moth laid an egg there. The stem, this young stem is so succulent, the larva just drills right down inside the stem and kills off the tip of it. So the leaves turn brown and hang. They call that flagging. Doesn't really hurt the plant much. The plant just dies back a little bit, starts over, keeps on growing. The problem is that the third generation of this insect, which is usually around May or June, drills right into the fruit through the stem that attaches to it. So that it's really hard to tell it's in there. Really hard. Now there's another critter that's very similar to this one, but we don't have it. It's the peach twig borer. It does the same boring on the tips, but when it goes into a peach, it goes right through the side into the peach, so you can tell it's there. But the ornamental fruit moth goes right through the stem that's attaching to the peach, so you can pick it and you still can't see any damage. Take a bite and there's a worm right around the pit, and that's a real nasty creature. Now I grew peaches for 10 years before I ever saw this thing, so it made it to, it was in the Central Valley because they grow so many peaches up there, but it wasn't in Southern California because we didn't grow many peaches in Southern California. We didn't have the right varieties until the 1980s, but I saw it for the first time in the early 90s, and it was going into 75% of my peaches. So we, in those days, again, we didn't have this product, Captain Jack's, so I didn't really have anything to treat it with. But now that we have this, well, all we could do in those days, you saw the flagging on the tip, you cut it off. Because that was the first generation of the year, going into the ends of these branches. Just keep clipping them off, keep clipping them off. Hopefully your neighbor does the same thing, or else their moths just fly to your tree and lay eggs in your fruit. So that's all we could do back in those days that was organic. Now that we have the Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew, you just spray it a couple times in the spring if you see that, and that'll stop them. Peaches, nectarines, right. Have seen a little damage on plums, but never in the fruit. Have seen a little damage on apricots. Have seen like 1 or 2 times when they actually got into an apricot, but generally it's peaches and nectarines.
So I'm sorry, you said the first generation goes into the stem of the plant, and then the later generation goes into the fruit of the plant?
Third generation's in the fruit. So the one thing about peaches, nectarines, if anything ripens early before mid-June, no worms. Anything that ripens mid-June to August has got worms in it. We don't have anything that ripens after that among peaches and nectarines, so that's it. They go into that. The third generation goes into the fruit. Fourth and fifth are back into the stems. Now, the interesting thing about this bug is it's one of the few creatures that overwinters as a caterpillar. So most moth, caterpillar type insects spend winter either as a cocoon, as an adult hiding, or as eggs. Well, this thing actually spends the winter as a caterpillar at the end of a branch. I'm trying to see if I see any here. But what they do when they're in the branch is the end of the branch gets swollen. And I don't see any. So if on your peach tree in the wintertime you go around, you look at it, and the end of the branch is kind of swollen and gummy, some gum coming out there, then you know that worm is there. You just cut off all the tips, and you get rid of that generation. Now what they say that they do, sometimes they're lower down in the branch and you don't want to cut it off. What they do is right when the tree's blooming, that caterpillar wakes up, eats flower petals. So that's why it's nice to spray them, even if it's a peach and they're not going to damage, the thrips aren't going to damage fruit. You might want to spray it right when it's blooming anyway to get rid of that first generation of the worms, because they're eating the flower petals. And if you're an isolated peach tree or nectarine tree, you spray it once when they're bloom, that's it. You probably are going to be clean the rest of the year. So when I lived in Mission Vale, none of my neighbors had peach trees after about the first 10 years we were there. And so if I hit my trees with the spindle sad right when they're blooming, that's it, no worms. No thrips, no worms. Just had to do that one spray.
If you got a fruit tree so it doesn't have any blooms on it, did you still use Captain Jack's to deal with the ornamental fruit moth?
Well, if they haven't bloomed yet, that's not going to help. So Captain Jack's on the tree. Right. Captain Jack's on the tree lasts 2 weeks. Whenever you spray it, lasts 2 weeks. So you wouldn't want to spray it until it was right.
And you said that spraying at the bloom time is
Right. Bees can be out, first light, which is like, right now it's like, what, 5:40? It's really early. Um, so, you can wake up at 4 o'clock and do it in the morning real early, or you can wait until, once the sun sets, it can still be light out, the bees don't fly anymore. That's true with a lot of insects. Once that sun sets, they just stop flying. So. Okay, that's most of what we have to do. Those are the main critters. Um, Last year we had a hot summer. We had in case of spider mites. So it's spider mites on peach trees the way it looks. Spider mites are just tiny spiders. Now, the way spiders eat insects is they pierce their bodies, injects a toxin that not only kind of paralyzes or kills the insect, but it liquefies the entire body contents and it sucks it out. That's how spiders feed. Spider mites do the same thing, but they do it one cell at a time in the leaf. They're real small critters. So they pierce a green cell, suck out all the contents of the green cell, and your leaves start looking like they have white dot, real miniature tiny white dots all over them. They get dusty looking. The ends start browning off because of the toxins they're injecting. So it shuts the tree down. It may not make that much difference economically to the tree. It probably still has plenty of energy, creating plenty of energy, but we don't like to see the spider mites on there. So the way to control spider mites is with one of the oil sprays. You can blast them with water. Now, spider mites, if you just get a hose out with a good nozzle and blast away 4 weeks in a row, you've pretty much cleared them all off. The reason why I have to do it more than once is because their eggs don't wash off as easily. And you have to wait for them to hatch, and you blast again, get them off of there before they can hatch more eggs or lay more eggs. And you'll clean it up, or you can, usually if we hit it once really well with an oil spray, that seems to wipe them out. Neem oil, mineral oil, they're both rated for organic orchards. And of course there's birds like peaches and nectarines. The two ways, the most successful ways to go after birds, one is, I would say the best one has been the scarecrow snake. Now this is not as realistic looking as you can find. I remember back in the 80s I had 20 fig trees out there in my yard, and when they were making fruit, say in August, September, it was like an aviary in my yard. It was just I would say 100 birds easily in those trees. I'm going, okay. So I heard about snakes and birds, so I was at Disneyland, and they had these really realistic looking rattlesnakes. They were about like this big, made out of rubber. Hung one up in the tree. Didn't hear a bird for 2 weeks. I was surprised because the scarecrow owls work for like 2 days. The scarecrow falcons don't work at all. But this thing, 2 weeks. And that's about the time your peaches take to ripen and be off the tree. So hang one of these up in the tree or buy a even more realistic one that works for about 2 weeks. The scare away tape works for about 2 weeks too. Mylar tape. And the way this scares birds off is you go between branches horizontally for a distance. And what this does, one side is red, one side is silver. And you see it, if you go up to Napa Valley, you'll see it hanging in the vineyards. So they hang it between posts. And if there's any breeze at all, and there usually is some breeze, it slowly flips back and forth, flipping the silver and the red side. And you just see this line going across the orchard just really fast. Red, silver, just flinging back and forth. And the birds hate that movement that this thing makes. Even though it's only flipping real slowly, that silver color just flings back and forth really badly. Now CD disc can work a little bit too, but this thing gives you that crazy movement just from the fact that the colors are going red, silver, back and forth real fast. So that works for a couple weeks too.
I have beautiful peaches right now about this size, and I just wrapped it with netting. Is that a bad idea?
Well, netting works. It's just hard to remove it because the tree grows right through it. So netting, if you don't take it off every few days, the new leaves go through it and you just can't get the netting off anymore. Because I did that that was the first thing I did in my fig trees, and after a week of the netting, I said, God, I can't get the netting off anymore. So I did the snakes after that. But netting will work. If you keep your tree small enough that you can build a little, yeah, if you can build a little structure over it and just put the netting over it, that's fine. So it's not right on it.
Like airflow, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Would shade cloth work also?
Too dark. Now, in the future, we'll probably have a better technology for netting or putting, because they've already, in Florida and in California now, they've already started screening off entire citrus orchards underneath screens, fine screens, so that keeps those little tiny bugs out. I mean, the psyllids are trying to keep out of the sides of aphids, so you know how fine that screen's got to be to keep those out. And they've actually found out, well, the cost-wise, it was less than $1 per square foot, and they're getting better production underneath the screens. They said the screens reflect the light a little bit, so normally when you've got sunlight hitting a tree, it comes in just at one angle. Well, with these screens, they said the back sides of the trees are becoming more productive because it's refracting the light in a different matter. So they're interested now to see how much productive that those orchards can be with the screening on them. So that might be the wave of the future. Just we'll have all this new screening that we can put over the entire backyard to keep all the critters out of it, and not be that expensive and be highly productive. So. Okay. Rats and mice, bubble gum's the first line of defense. It doesn't kill all of them, but you'll get a lot of them. So just be aware of that. Bubble gum, they'll eat it. Just unwrap it, leave it around. Don't let your dog eat it, although the dog doesn't kill the dog. But if a rat eats one piece of bubble gum, it's like you eating this much bubble gum. It doesn't digest. And it kills them like in 2 days. We just can't believe it works that fast.
Is there problems with the birds of prey though that would eat them? Like would that also kill
Safer than rat poison.
Yeah.
I don't think animals that prey on other animals eat their stomach contents. I think they leave that out. They just eat, they just eat more or less the muscles.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know well, like they said, if the animal can vomit, the bubble gum won't kill it. It's just that rats and mice don't vomit. So we were hoping it killed squirrels, but it doesn't seem to kill squirrels. Just rats, mice, and we've heard gophers. Those three critters, the bubble gum does a real good job on. I have experience with rats and mice. So far I haven't had any gophers to try to kill. So, okay, so that's the, yes.
How do you do the bubble gum? Just sit it around?
Yeah, they.
3 or places wherever you think you're gonna, or the arbors.
Well, in our yard, because our dog likes bubble gum, we just set the bubble gum on top of the block wall. And yeah, we got, again, 2 rats and 1 mouse in 2 days. They're just laying there dead on the ground. We're going, my God, that was amazing.
Wow.
So I got an email from someone saying that's cruel, unusual punishment on a rat. Yeah.
So based on your comment that they don't feel well, would you say that if you can get away with pruning less, you would try to prune less than a typical fruit tree because of that? Or would you just say keep pruning, but just be aware that?
Yeah, well, they say for homeowners, peach trees last 25 years, but the production is declining. So if you want it to be the most productive you can be, then even if with all this pruning, it won't kill it. It just the production goes down. It still may be plenty for fruit for you. Because I never prune my peach trees the way that they do it now. I just let them get bigger and bigger. Of course, and they become less and less productive as they get older. So, but that is the best way you can prune them. Yeah, but try not to top them when they're too big. So on any tree, the bigger the stem you're cutting, the more damage you do. If it's a branch that's only this thick when you're pruning it, yeah, very little damage. But if you cut through this thing, you'll have a dead zone in the tree all the way down to the roots. Now, generally when they die and fall over, you'll notice that it's hollow inside. The termites cleaned it out. Don't blame the termites. The termites in the plant world are the good guys. They don't want them in their houses because their house is all dead wood. But in the plant world, termites only eat dead wood. They don't eat living tissue. So they keep the trees alive longer than they could be. Because if you have all this dead wood in the tree, the mushrooms and the fungi will just eat it out alive and kill it. But the termites clean out the dead wood only, leave the living tissue to continue growing. So they're a symptom of dead wood, but they're not causing it. So, okay. Water-wise, like anything production-wise, you want to keep them well watered. The only way you can figure that out, if you have a rod, metal rod about as thick as this or a little thicker, like a piece of rebar, not with this on it, but just a straight piece of rod, if you can push it in the ground next to your tree a foot deep by hand, you've got adequate water. If you can't go down that deep, it's too dry. So you want that, while it's blooming, while it's fruiting, fruit's growing, you want to keep it moist. The more moisture you give it, the bigger the fruit will be. They say it's really critical right when they're blooming and setting fruit and right when the fruit's sizing up. That's about a month before you're picking. Those are the most critical times to make sure you're not dry. But they don't like being dry. So if you don't have a foot of moisture in the ground, water a little more. I mean, generally in orchards, all the orchards nowadays, the modern orchards, water daily when it's 80 degrees or warmer. All of agriculture found out in the last 2 generations that the more frequently you water, the less water you need to use for the same moisture content in the tree. Not what the Department of Water tells you at all. It's not once a week watering that's better. They did that study in orchards, and University of California, Davis did the study. They had one orchard where they watered it deeply once a week, and one orchard where they watered the same amount of water, but lightly every day. They dug the trees out of the ground. They said the ones that were watered lightly every day had a significantly bigger, deeper root system than the ones that were watered once a week deeply. They didn't expect that at all, but that's what the results were. So they're going with it. Water frequently. You get better roots, deeper roots. Not. Yeah, they'll go after the water, right? Yeah, yeah, none of it's true. When they did the testing, none of it turned out to be true. So, one other thing I should mention. There is a replant syndrome on any plant. So the reason crops are rotated is because you grow a peach tree once for at least, say, 3 years. The ground, you remove that tree, the ground is so full, every quarter inch is so full of dead peach roots that you plant another peach tree or something related into that, it won't grow. You can have a peach tree here that's established after 3 years, and you plant a peach tree right next to it. If you leave that soil that you just dug that hole, which is now cut peach roots, next to that young peach tree, it'll stunt it too. So they don't like dead relatives' roots next to them. It's equivalent to, say, trying to raise a child in a house where you've got pieces of dead humans scattered around the rooms. It's not good for them. If you took out a peach tree and planted an apple tree, the apple won't care. It's far enough relative, it doesn't care. Take out the peach tree, put an orange tree, doesn't care. But any plant has the same problem. If you pull out old roses, put new roses in their place, they don't grow. They don't die, they just don't grow. They can't grow into that zone with the dead roots of their relatives there. Now you can way around it, and I met a guy who actually did this. He said, my job when I was in college was to go into the apple orchard. Wherever they bumped into the apple tree and broke it, he would dig out the apple tree, dig a hole 3 foot wide, 1.5 foot deep, dig another hole 40 feet away, and exchange the dirt. So the dirt he's putting in this hole has very few apple roots in it. Put the new apple in there, away it goes just fine. So you rotate the soil. You can either rotate the plant or rotate the soil. Put in virgin soil, at least with no apple roots in it, and the apple tree will do fine. Same thing goes with all these trees too. Well, they were doing, and this was a study by UC Davis too. If they go 3 foot wide, 1.5 foot deep, they'll get very quickly a 10 by 10 foot tree again. You don't need a tree that big. So if you go like 2 by 2 by a foot deep, you'll probably get a tree 5 foot wide real fast. And that's about all you want. Yes.
I've had a problem with the growing the peach trees that died on in the past, and I want to plant my new August Pride in the same place. So if I got enough of the top pot soil, can I replace
Right.
most soil down there, dig a big enough hole and
Yeah, get our top pot. That's what we're growing all our fruit trees in, is our top pot potting soil. And if you did 2 by 2 by 1 foot deep, that would be like 4 bags, which is a lot of dirt. That's more dirt that's in a 24-inch box. So that'll give you a pretty good sized tree. Probably give you 60, 80 fruit a year easily. Right. Right. Yeah. If you did 3 by 3 by 1.5 foot deep, that would be what, 13.5 bags of our top pot. You know, yeah. But you don't need, right, you don't need a 10-foot tree. It's
Is it like 2 by 2?
2 by 2 is plenty. 2 by 2, actually 2 by 2 by 1 foot deep. Because if you go 2 by 2 by 2 foot deep, then it's already 8 bags of soil. But 2 by 2 by 1 foot deep will be 4 bags of dirt, and that's a lot of soil for one of these trees.
How many feet are your bags?
1 cubic foot bags.
see as far, we talked about before, the roots really don't go as far down as we typically think they would go. They go
1 foot. Yeah, our soil class, and I'm not doing one for a while, but in our soil class we talk about that roots have to breathe oxygen, and that's about as deep as they can breathe air. It's about a foot. So you see in the news when trees fall over, the roots aren't very deep. That much soil comes up with the big tree. The roots just can't breathe. And plus, you know, we're a dry climate. The only moisture they have is our irrigation water. Didn't go that far down either. So, if you put an air pipe in the ground, perforated pipe, the roots will fall that as deep as you can go. A friend of mine who's a geologist says that they've worked in fractured rock where there's an earthquake fault, and they'll find roots 200 foot deep in that cracked rock. So if the air can get down there, the roots will follow. But if they can't, then they just keep out. So, okay, let's go over any other questions about care? We'll go over the varieties.
I think the care question I had is still, if you had the little dieback right now, like I'm having big peaches, and then the end of the branch has, do I just go around and trim up all the little dead branches? Like, I'm just surprised at how much there's, the leaf will stop, and now I've got a dead branch, about that much. So just trim that back?
Yeah, you can trim it off, but don't cut into the living tissue.
Right, okay.
So if you see the end brown, cut into the brown area close to the green, but don't go into the green, because again, they don't seal their wounds well.
Gotcha.
So if you go into the green, they'll die back even a little further.
Oh, gotcha.
So try to stay within the brown zone. I mean, even if you didn't trim it, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Because the branches are so skinny, there's not going to be any termites that live in there or any other bugs that live in that tiny little twig. So when you have a big dead part on a tree, you want to get rid of that because you get those bark beetles living in that, but not in a little tiny branch. So
Like what?
1/8 of an inch, something like that, of green or of brown wood. Yeah. Yeah, the old days, they say when you got dead, diseased areas, cut into the green area. Well, on certain plants, it's okay, like apple trees, they seal so well, but on peaches, maples, birches, you don't want to cut into clean wood because they don't seal well. Okay, so on peaches, we actually have a decent quantity of cultivars that'll do well here. The University of California, Riverside has a field station in Irvine. So they did a study back in the 70s, or was it 80s, where they planted all these different peach trees from around the country in Irvine. And what they found out was the ones that produced the most, that had the lowest need of chill. So the trees that don't need much chill will consistently produce more fruit than the trees that need more chill. They said those trees were the worst tasting, and the trees that needed the most chill were the best tasting peaches. So that's our dilemma, is that, well, what happens? The trees that need less chill usually bloom, we've even seen them bloom in December, or January or February, and the fruit ripens in April or May. Well, if we have cool, cloudy weather, April, May, there's no flavor. Now, if you have the same peach tree in Florida or in Arizona, by April, May, it's 90 degrees. They're getting plenty of heat. They taste fine there. Here, we got May, June, gloom or cool, rainy weather in April. They got no flavor. So the lowest chill peaches and nectarines often don't have any flavor for us. So that's our dilemma. The most productive peaches, nectarines just don't taste that good. We need a low chill peach or nectarine that ripens late. We have our sunny weather starting about the first day of summer. That's when we start getting it. The further you go into July, the hotter it gets. Usually a week after the 4th of July, we're into really warm weather. This last year, was the second day after the 4th of July. But normally the week after the 4th, we're into the nice 90-degree weather. And all the stone fruit turns out really good from that point all the way into fall. So low chill, late ripening. On peaches, there's one that has worked out real well, August Pride. Now this one, we're not sure what to say about it, because it seems to need, we think it needs about 250 hours of chill. But what happened 2014, 2015, 2016, the winters with only 80 hours of chill, officially, or 80 to maybe 150 hours chill, they still woke up at the normal time, made a small crop. Whereas a lot of our peaches, like Red Baron, just sat there and sat there and sat there, no leaves, no flowers, nothing until August. But the August Pride woke up at the right time. And didn't have many flowers, but still bloomed and still made some really good peaches. So we're amazed at August Pride. I didn't bring one in here, but August Pride has been our best one because it does ripen late July to early August. Big, and it's a yellow flesh peach, real big. Pretty darn good. It's about as good as a peach as you can want. The very best peach we can grow has been Red Baron, but it needs about 300 hours of chill. And it's very particular. So we didn't get a good crop between 2013 and this year. Red Baron didn't do much at all. This year we got a good bloom on them. We got the 300 hours of chill. We think we got maybe 350 this year. So it's cropping, and it's going to make a good crop. The nice thing about Red Baron that people like, and this is also yellow meat peach, and it also is late July to early August, is that it's got the best bloom we've seen on a peach tree. So when Red Baron's in bloom, the whole tree looks like one giant red carnation. It's got these almost pure red flowers, and the bloom on it seems to go for 6 weeks. The first time we saw it, we're going, no way this is a fruiting peach tree. Just no way. We had heard about it from Robert Smouse, who lived in Malibu. He was the LA Times garden writer for decades. And he said that this has got everything he wants in for Malibu. So we picked it up in the 1980s and go, well, this is a wonderful peach. So in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, it was our best peach by far. And then 2013 to now, it hasn't done much at all because of the lack of winters. Now, we've seen this pattern before. So Red Baron may be our best peach again in the next few decades. So the early 80s, we had 5 years in a row, no winter. The late 80s, we were really cold winters. 90s were moderate winters, but still cool enough for Red Baron. So it's just the early 80s were no good for Red Baron, and then 2013 to now was no good for Red Baron. We think we're going to go into a really cold cycle, and if the astronomers are right, they're saying the next 20, 30 years will be in a really cool cycle. Global warming is, they said, pretty much over. I know we had one customer tell me he makes instruments for the astronomers to measure the sun. He said the 1950s to the 1990s were the hottest sun years anyone's ever seen ever. Of course, they've only been studying the sun for 500, so it probably happened before that too. But they said the 1950s to about 2000, the sun was so active, unprecedented. That's what caused global warming. And now in the last 5 years, the sun has just shut off. I mean, it's only 2% difference between the warmest the sun gets and the coolest. But they're saying right now the sun's at the lowest sunspot activity they've ever seen. It's nothing. There's no sunspot activity at all. So they said it'd take about 5 years to cool off, but they said within 5 years we'll be in a marginal ice age pattern. So, and they expect that to last for 20 to 30 years. So we'll see. We're going to live to see if global warming was true or not. The astronomers say no. It depends who you follow. So we'll see. Anyway, go back to the peaches. So Red Baron was our best peach, maybe our best peach in the future. The only white peach that has done well at all in the last 20 years really is Tropic Snow. That's this one here. It needs like 150 hours, so this one didn't miss any years at all. It's a white. The problem with Tropic Snow is it ripens early, so it's usually May, June when it ripens. It's not bad. It's just not as flavorful as the later ripeners, but it's not bad. We may start carrying Babcock, which is one of the first peaches we ever carried here, but Babcock, I think, needs about 300 hours of chill. We had that in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, but we haven't had it lately, but we might, because Babcock was a nice white peach that ripened in early July, but I've stayed away from it because of the lack of chill the last few years. Let me just check Babcock here, see what they're saying the chill is. 250 to 300. A lot of the chill numbers that they've written down in the books are wrong because they're, I don't know, they don't, the guys who are, they get reports from Southern California saying, oh, my apricot tree always produces every year. So like Katy apricot, they told us first it was like 250 hours because it never seemed to fail where they had it in Garden Grove. Well, the problem is that in Orange County there's plenty of microclimates, and the big microclimate is the Santa Ana River. If you live within a mile of the Santa Ana River or half a mile of the Santa Ana River, you've got a different zone winter because the Santa Ana River originates in the San Bernardino Mountains, I believe, and it drains all the cold air from the interior out to the ocean. And all the big rivers do that in Southern California. The LA River, San Gabriel River, we know people who live along those rivers, they grow anything they want. They can grow walnuts, they can grow Bartlett pears. Those riverbeds drain the cold air in the wintertime. The cold air is heavy, it flows like water, goes out the riverbeds to the ocean. Friends who have nurseries along the San Gabriel River said, we get frost every night, because that cold air is coming down that riverbed. So it's a different zone if you live near the Santa Ana River. If you live right here, and we may not get below 40 in the wintertime, Santa Ana River is going to hit the 20s because that's where the cold air goes.
How close to that actual river?
Well, a friend of mine, one of our former employees, in fact, well, he was a volunteer here, lives a block off the edge of the Santa River. And he's the one that's growing Bartlett pears, which need like 400 hours of chill. And he didn't have any crop failures throughout the warm winters. So they get really cold along that riverbed. Just like back in 1990, I used to live in South County. We hit 23 degrees in Lake Forest in 1990. A friend of mine who was right along the riverbed in San Juan hit 17 or 15. I think they said 17. They said their plumerias just turned to mush overnight. It was so cold. Yes.
Did I think the reverse then? If I'm 4 blocks in the back bay, we're going to be more temperate all the time?
Well, it depends on height. So if you live on the foothills, so any hills around Orange County are going to be warmer.
I mean the back bay coming in from the ocean. You know what I mean? Like, is that going to keep it more temperate, not getting cold?
You got that San Diego Creek running into the back bay though, so you can still, there's people on the back bay area, as long as you're not too high, the lower you are around there, you're going to be cold too. And the thing about the ocean is the ocean doesn't get very warm in the winter. So if the ocean water's staying right around 55, you're still getting chill. So we're seeing a lot of people right along the ocean bed that, you know, the Sunset magazine says the people around the ocean don't get any chill. Well, it's not true. The people who live on the ocean seem to get more chill because they don't get hot. It stays really cool right in that zone of 50, 55 degrees. That's giving them chill, even though it's not much chill. They're constantly getting it. So I would say not bad. These hills here are kind of like the worst. You get on top of these hills around Orange County, the inland hills here, Foothill, Tustin Hills, Irvine Hills, that's the avocado belt of California. Whittier, San Gabriel Hills behind there, that's the avocado belt because the cold air can't sit there, slides down those hills stay warm. Even though air is colder, the higher you go, it's like half a degree every 100 feet, maybe a third of a degree every 100 feet up because of the lower density of the air has caused it to get colder. Still, the cold air slides down those hills and the hills stay warmer. So if you're on the hilltop and you grow tropic snow, if you're down low, you grow red barren. So, okay, another really good peach that we grow is Mid-Pride, which, let me get the official chill they sell us on Mid-Pride. $2.50. So it didn't miss too many winters. 250 hours of chill. It ripens early July, which is still a good time. It's yellow meat also. There's two different kinds of donut peaches. So the donut peaches are shaped like bagels, and the neat thing about, one neat thing about them is when they're ripe, you can just push the seed out in the middle and you got a donut of flesh. The original donut peach, this is called Sauzee Swirl. So there's the I don't know why they call it Sauzee Swirl. It kind of gives it an Australian type name. Sauzee, sounds Australian. And then there's the regular donut. They're both white meat peaches. Sauzee Swirl seems to need about 100 hours of chill. It's super low. I mean, this was the first thing blooming in our nursery. You can see the fruit's almost ripe. So it's very early. That's the only thing we're worried about. It's going to be early if it's cloudy or supposed to drizzle this next week. If it ripens at that time, then it won't have any flavor. It looks like it's about 2 or 3 weeks away still. They're still rock hard, but it's real early, so real productive here. We'll see how it tastes. This is the first year we're getting fruit on this one. The regular donut needs about 300 hours of chill. Now, donut was the original peach they brought from China to California that had the low chill. So most of the peaches that we grow are descendants of donut. So donut, the book says 200 to 300. I would say it's got to be at least 300 because when I grew donut on the hilltop, I never got a big crop. It was always a few peaches every year. Never like something like this. So donut, these two are both white meat. Sauzee, Swirl, we're seeing when they ripen, but it looks like it's going to be May. Donut ripens in July, early July. So donut's the better quality one, but Sauzee Swirl is going to be more productive. All these peaches we've mentioned so far have pretty flowers. Back in the old days, we grew one called Bonita Peach. Back in the 80s, that was our best peach in those days. Real big. That had the ugliest flowers I've ever seen on a peach tree. It had no petals. So we don't grow Bonita anymore, but it's still a top-rated peach. But we haven't gotten the chill for it lately. It says here a little less than 400 hours, and I believe it needs more chill. There's one new peach out that we're interested in called Peachy Keen. One of our friends who was a social studies teacher in my kids' junior high school, his last name is Keen, so he had to buy 4 of these. But anyway, Peachy Keen is new. It was found on a beach near Pismo, growing just above the high water mark. So someone spit out a seed. It came up. Turns out to be quite good. I haven't eaten it yet. This will be our first crop. It's pretty new. Seems to be about 250 hours of chill. Yellow meat. Ripens, let's see if they say, I think it's early July. We're still trying to figure it out.
That's what I bought from you. That's what I have.
So they claim early July, which would be a good time for it. And the most impressive thing they said is that, like, the company that introduced this tree said they had 1.5-year-old trees that averaged 100 fruit per tree. They couldn't believe the production on this thing. So real heavy producer, early July, fairly low chill. So that's all the stuff we're looking for. Unfortunately, it's not lower than 250. They said it was going to be as low as 150. It's not that low. They think that because it was on a beach that it didn't need much chill, but Pismo Beach has got to be really cool all winter long. It can't be anything more than 60 degrees there. So they would have almost, probably 500 hours of chill on that beach. But Peachy Keen, at least it bloomed out about the right time for 250 hours of chill.
So may I make sure I'm understanding what you're saying? You're saying that when you're by the beach, that if it just doesn't get that hot, that also counts
Right,
towards chill hours.
right.
I'm always thinking, I'm going to, the website, and I'm like, only looking at 32. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm like, okay, how many chill hours do we have last year? How many, and then I'm trying to average just 32. But you're saying actually if you're by the beach and you don't go above.
Well, 55 or below is getting chill. 55 to 32. The old model was something that, I don't know, some of the University of California chill models still use that one where you only get chill between 34 and 45. It's totally wrong because then we'd get no chill at all. So the University of Utah created a better chill model. And I was told by a college professor too that University of California's model, they're using chill that's like this. There's no blocks like that. It's more like this. So it's a curve, it's not a block. So you get your best chill at around 45, you get lower chill as you get toward 55, and you probably get a little chill below 30, 34. It's curves. So this was a professor at Myra Costa College. He had given me his theory on chill, and it seemed to work a lot better. but the University of Utah came up with that. So if you use their model, yeah, you get a lot more chill on the coast. Okay, so I think that's most of the peaches we have. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I have any others. Eva's Pride we had earlier were out. Eva's Pride chill was like 200 hours, yellow meat, but it ripens May. So to me, when I grew that, it ripened in the middle of the rainstorm, so it was okay tasting, wasn't great. We also have one Long Beach peach left. Long Beach was found on a street in Long Beach. Someone spit a seed out there. It was a pretty good peach, ripened in May also. So that one needed about 150 to 200 hours of chill. Didn't need much cold at all. Not a bad tasting peach, but I no longer have a supplier for that one, so that one's kind of fallen by the wayside. The ones from Florida, and you'll see these at our nurseries, August, Early Amber, Florida Prince. There's a lot of, and there's some from Arizona Desert. Can't remember all the names now. That we've used to carry that weren't any good. Early Grand, we used to carry that. That's from Arizona. Early Ambers from, not sure where that's from. But there's a lot of peaches that'll grow well here, produce well, but just not have much taste.
These ones that you talk about being spit out, then presumably they grow into a big volunteer tree,
Mm-hmm.
and then are they grafting, or how are they making it?
Yeah, just like that peachy keen was found in a beach. They cut off branches, grafted them onto other peach trees, then started growing them in the Central Valley. So yeah, most of the peach trees are just vines. Now there is a company in the Central Valley that does a lot of breeding work. Zyger Genetics. They did the Pride series, so Mid Pride, Eva's Pride, June Pride, August Pride are all their work. So it's a family of breeders. They don't do anything GMO. It's kind of weird though what they have to do. But it's not technically GMO because they do all the, well, like this thing. So they created Spicy Nectaplum, which is essentially our best nectarine, and we'll go over that. But this is a cross between a nectarine and a plum. In nature, this would never work. What they find is that you take, I don't know which was the parent nectarine or the plum, but you take the pollen, you pollinate the flower, the embryo starts developing, but it's such a weird cross. So in a flower, more than one pollen has to get in there. More than one male semen has to get into the flower. One of them makes the embryo. The other ones make the fruit. Well, it doesn't work. Nectarine plum hybrid doesn't work as the fruit. So that the flower will fail to make a fruit, and you'll never get the embryo out of it. So what Zyger Genetics is specialized in is right after they pollinate the flower, they do an embryo rescue. They go inside the flower, take out the embryo that's developing before the fruit dies, and put it in a petri dish and grow it there. So because that cross can't work, they save the baby and grow it in a different environment, and then they created this tree, which is a totally, would never happen in nature, but yeah, so an in vitro baby. So let's go to the nectarines first. So the Zyger family, they're doing, things that are part peach, part cherry, part plum. It's like just crazy things, but they've gotten some really worthwhile fruit that we'll go over in a few weeks, like the pluots. So, but they weren't the first. Luther Burbank, he created the Burbank potato that saved Ireland, made his money back in New York, and then moved to Northern California, made his farm there, and he started working on plums. And he says I crossed the plum and an apricot, and everybody thought he was crazy. This was back in the late 1800s. And when they find the genetics on his fruit, he crossed an apricot and a plum. He was the first one to do that cross. And nobody believed it. But that's because he didn't keep any notes. He was the guy that just did the crossing. He said, whatever happens, happens. Anyway, so we have nectarines. Nectarines, we have nothing that has worked well lately. So back in the 1980s, 1990s, our best nectarines were Arctic Star and Snow Queen. They both are white nectarines. They both need 300 to 350 hours of chill. This worked for a long time, but it hasn't worked in the last 5 years up until this year again. They ripen late June. Well, Arctic Star is mid-June, and Snow Queen is late June. Now, if you're inland like Fullerton, Whittier, mid-June is fine. Arctic Star turns out, people in Fullerton love Arctic Star. Near the coast, the Snow Queen looks a little better because it's like a week later ripening. So those were our best nectarines for 20, 30 years, but they haven't done a thing until this year, the last 5 years. And they're both white. Some people want yellow nectarines. The other white nectarine that some people plant was Gold Mine. I grew that for 20 years. It needs about 350 hours. I got like one crop off of that one, so that doesn't work here too well unless you live near the big rivers. So then the yellow meat nectarines, we've got Desert Delight. Which is about 100 to 100, well, let's say 150 hours. So that one will never fail, but it does ripen. Let me check the date on that. I think it ripens in May. This is the one I grew back in the early 90s that had all messed up by the thrips. Early June. It's not too bad. So that actually is not bad. And then we have Double Delight. The book says it's 300 hours, but we're thinking it was the last stone fruit to wake up here this year. So we're thinking 350. And Double Light would be the best. I would say equivalent to Red Baron. The best nectarine we can grow here is Double Light. It's really highly rated. It ripens mid-July. So it's got the right time. We just haven't had the cold for it. This year they did wake up and are making a crop this year. So we got the cold this year. So again, hopefully we'll have, again, cooler winters in the future, and Double Light, Snow Queen, Arctic Star will all work again. But we've been, the last few years, the nectarines have been not so good. So now we have this spicy Nectaplum. And we think the chill on spicy, so spicy, and really, when you eat it, you don't taste, I don't know, they claim there's plum in there, but I don't taste it at all. It's like, to me, it's a real dark skin, and the skin of the fruit, same color as these leaves, real dark red on the outside, white on the inside. Tastes just like a good white nectarine with, plum-colored leaves, essentially. So spicy Nectaplum. White meat, we think the chill on's 250 and it ripens mid-July. So among all the things we sell here, this one might have the best characteristics. fairly low chill, ripens mid-July. The Dave Wilson rep, Tom Spellman, says that's the best thing they've ever come up with. Everybody really likes it. The problem is it does get that thrip damage on the fruit, so you do have to spray it. The leaves do turn, they lose all their purple by midsummer. But up until then, they're absolutely gorgeous. The flowers are mauve-y pink. They're definitely more mauve than the other peaches and nectarines around it. So quite attractive tree. This one we didn't, it came with this fork in it, so we're just going to work with two verticals. It didn't come single trunk, so we'll work with the two verticals.
So is it, can the fruit, can the tree have flowers, but then those like as far as chill goes, can it have flowers, but then they don't turn to fruit, or if it flowers, it should produce?
The flowers it should, but there have been some years where we know the chill wasn't good and they made a few flowers and nothing happened. So the
Last year, we got probably size of a quarter was about it. They had that, I guess, whatever it is on the outside of the skin of the fruit,
thrip.
But this year we've got really filled out, a lot of fruit all over the tree.
Yeah, we're still waiting for a really good winter. So in the 80s, when we had, back in the late 80s, I had about 80 fruit trees in my backyard. And we had those winters where every night in December and January was in the mid-30s. You know, those were the days you used to turn on the radio and you hear these frost warnings for Orange County. It's like, you don't hear that anymore. But, you know, they would say 29 degrees in Fountain Valley or stuff like that. And in February that year, one of those, well, a couple years in a row, it would hit 80 degrees in February. My backyard was just one ball of white flowers. Just couldn't believe it. Just everything was just covered in flowers. And we haven't seen anything like that since the 80s, where, you know, there's so much coolness and sudden warmth that everything just explodes. And you know you're getting a good crop when you see that. So. Okay, any questions on these?
On trimming them, how, like that tree there, can you cut that back down even small? How far down can you cut? If you want it to be high, then you can pick without ever getting on the ladder.
Right, so the height you can pick fruit from is about 7 foot. So just keep, if you can't reach it, cut it off. Again, try to do most of your pruning on 1-year-old wood. All this is 1-year-old wood. If you take a big tree and cut it down through thicker wood, you can kill it. So be careful with that. I mean, peaches are so sensitive, peaches, nectarines. If you were to take and cut off every branch real close to the trunk on this tree, you'd probably kill the tree. They can't take that much damage all at one time.
So but you could say like take one down here, one up there, this month, maybe next month, so we'll take another one out.
Still might kill it, but you know, if it's too tall, it's too tall. I mean, you know, some people have these 20-foot peach trees, and you go, okay, well, what do? We can try to cut it down and see if it'll grow back, but you might kill it, but then just start over. Oh, one last note. On nectarines especially, there is one other problem they get called brown rot. And that's when the fruit, right as it's ripening, is rotting on the tree. That's a fungus, but it usually only happens if you fertilize too much nitrogen. Too much nitrogen in the plant system, the skin of the fruit doesn't mature very well and it stays too immature, so it's rotting. The disease gets in there, rots the fruit right as when it's ripening. Mainly nectarines get that. And it's too much nitrogen fertilizer. I was reading an article, University of California said they had one orchard that was suffering from that. Too much nitrogen in the ground and then in the trees. It took them 3 years of no fertilizing, to get the nitrogen levels low enough where they wouldn't get the brown rot on them. So be careful not to go overboard on nitrogen on peaches and nectarines. But nectarines,
See it on the outside as it's on the tree, or it's when you cut into the fruit?
the whole fruit, it looks like it's rotting. It just starts to get wet looking, the skin. Brown rot, yeah.
So then what are your recommendations for
Don't know. I don't. You know, the guys. I've talked to the guys at the plant lab in Anaheim, Solon Plant Lab, and they said there's no way to measure fertilizer, especially if your house. You know, if you're not on a farm where everything's uniform. There's just no way you can't tell how much fruit. You know, so you just have to. You're always guessing. Now with most fruit trees, especially once they're big like this, you know, that's probably big enough forever. Just the mulch on the ground is probably enough fertilizer. Just dead leaves underneath the tree will probably give it enough food. But, you know, so one thing you want to make sure is you get at least 1 to 2 foot of growth every year. You don't want to see the redness like this happening. That means that leaf is starving. So you just guessing. I mean, they said the farmers are getting, well, what farmers can do that we don't normally do is they can send their foliage to the lab and ask the lab how much of this and how much of that they add to their farm. So they can get the exact numbers. You can't unless you have a farm. Because, you know, your yard, you know, the problem is we have grass lawns, we have shade trees nearby, we have other bushes nearby. They're all using, the roots are all there. And how much your fruit tree is actually getting, it's always a guess. You don't know.
What about worm composting on top? Is that more nitrogen?
You don't need the worms. If you don't have the worms, you'd still, you know, whatever the worms are eating, you just throw it there.
Yeah, I've got the worm composter that I take my stuff.
Yeah. But whatever you put in your worm composter, you can just throw it on the tree.
Basically, yeah.
Okay. I think we're done.
So much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.